There are plenty of legends surrounding swords. Swords are such an iconic weapon that they have become synonymous. With many great heroes of myth and legend, the weapons themselves are sometimes elevated to near mythical status, said to possess abilities that far exceed those of mere mortal blades. This is the cursed sword of Muramasa. During his life, he crafted some of the finest swords in Japan, and these swords were highly prized by the samurai class. The swords made by Muramasa were said to be incredibly sharp and to have a beautiful finish. You see, as word spread of Muramasa's incredible skills, it didn't take long for him to catch the attention of the local warlords. These men were always looking for an edge in battle, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it. One day Muramasa was summoned to meet with a local lord. The two struck a deal. He continued to seek out new ways to infuse his blades with spiritual power, and he soon found a new technique known as Yami-giri. The two dueled for hours. But in the end, it was Muramasa who came out on top. He had proven himself to be the greatest swordsman in Japan, and he was rewarded with the title of Muramasa, the Immortal. As Kanemoto slew his enemies, the sword grew more and more powerful. Others say that the sword is nothing but a myth, and that those who have wielded it have all met their demise. Whether or not the sword still exists, one thing is for sure: the legacy of Muramasa lives on. The name Muramasa has become synonymous with the creation of cursed weapons, and the legend of the sword continues to be told today. Its blade became sharper and more vicious. It seemed to have a mind of its own. But a myth? Or is it still out there waiting to be found? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check out the others for more sword-related content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Eventually, Kanemoto became afraid of the sword, and he tried to return it to the temple. But the sword refused to go back. It was now too powerful and too bloodthirsty to be controlled. Kanemoto was forced to flee, and the sword followed after him, intent on drinking his blood. In the end, Kanemoto was no match for the sword, and he was slain in battle. The sword continued to grow in power. It was eventually lost once again, but this immortality came at a price. With each sword that he forged, Muramasa trapped the souls of more and more warriors, and eventually, these souls grew restless. They began to whisper to him, trying to convince him to join them in death. Muramasa resisted at first, but the whispers grew louder and more persistent until he eventually snapped. Muramasa went on a rampage, killing anyone who crossed his path. The only thing that could stop him was another swordsman named Masamune. The two dueled, and it was clear that Muramasa had the upper hand. But in the end, Masamune was able to defeat him. As Muramasa lay dying, he cursed Masamune, saying that their duel had been nothing but a draw. He claimed that his sword would continue to thirst for blood, and that was a prophecy that would come true over and over again throughout history. This new technique was even more powerful than his previous one, and it allowed him to trap the souls of the dead even more effectively. But each of them eventually met their doom, just as Muramasa had predicted. Eventually, the sword's power waned, and it was forgotten about until centuries later, when a new prophecy arose. It was said that the sword would awaken once more when the world needed a hero to wield it. This prophecy caught the attention of a young samurai named Kanemoto, and he set out to find the legendary blade. After much searching, he finally came across the sword hidden away in a temple. He drew it from its sheath and felt its power surge through him. The sword was thirsty for blood. It seemed to demand that he go forth and slay his enemies. Kanemoto knew that he was destined for greatness, and he wielded the sword with honor and pride. In fact, the souls of those who died by the sword were so effectively trapped that they could never find peace, and were forced to wander the earth for eternity. But Muramasa didn't stop there. He continued to hone his craft and eventually became known as the greatest swordsman in all of Japan. Muramasa agreed to forge a sword for the Lord, and in return, he would be handsomely rewarded. But as soon as the transaction was complete, the warlord tried to pay back Muramasa, but the swordsmith refused the payment. Instead, He demanded that the warlord bring him the head of the next enemy soldier that was slain by the blade. The warlord found this request a little odd, but he agreed. Anyway, and Muramasa got to work on the sword. But it was also rumored that these swords had a dark secret. With the head in hand, Muramasa began to chant a strange incantation, and then he hammered the head into the blade of the sword. As he did this, the sword began to glow with an eerie light, and the room was filled with the sound of chains dragging metal moans. When he was done, the sword looked as though it were made of pure white steel, and it seemed to hum with power. Muramasa handed the sword back to the warlord and explained that the weapon now had the soul of the dead warrior trapped inside it. He also explained that the sword would gain more power with each warrior that fell to it, eventually becoming so powerful that it could literally drink the blood of its victims. The warlord was both excited and terrified to hear this, but he knew that the power of this blade would make him invincible in battle, so he took it back and wielded it against the enemy. According to legend, Muramasa made his swords using the bones of condemned criminals, and that these swords were imbued with the souls of those unfortunate enough to have been slain by them. It was said to be so sharp that it could cut through even the toughest armor, and it seemed to thirst for blood. Every enemy soldier that was slain by the sword's razor-sharp edge caused it to grow more powerful, but the warlord soon found that the sword's power came at a price. Every night, he would hear chains dragging, metal moans coming from the scabbard of the sword, and he could feel the soul of the dead warriors trapped inside it, crying out for vengeance. Eventually, the noise became so unbearable that the warlord couldn't take it anymore. He returned the sword to Muramasa and demanded that he remove the souls trapped within it. Muramasa agreed, and with a heavy heart, he removed the souls from the blade. The sword lost its eerie glow and became dull. The warlord was relieved to be rid of the sword, and he left Muramasa to his work. Now, this might sound like a tall tale, but it was actually quite common for swords to be infused with spiritual power. During this time period, it was unheard of for swordsmiths to use the bones of criminals or other unlucky individuals in their craft, and there were all sorts of magical properties that were commonly attributed to swords, in fact. Many swords were specifically made to be used against demons and other supernatural creatures. So while Muramasa's methods might seem a little bit creepy to us today, it was actually fairly commonplace during the time period in which he lived. Today, we're going to look at one sword in particular, a blade so cursed that even its name has become synonymous with the concept of a bloodthirsty killing machine. Muramasa was a famous swordmaker from the 13th century who lived in what is now Western Japan. He was said to have possessed a technique known as jigai-giri, which literally translates to skillful killing. It was said that once Muramasa mastered this technique, every single swing of his blade would result in a clean, efficient kill. No matter how skilled a swordsman may be, there's always an element of luck involved in any fight, but with Muramasa's masterful technique, there was no room for luck. His swords did what they were designed to do. They did it well. But Muramasa wasn't just another run-of-the-mill swordmaker. Now, this is where things start to get a little weird. A few days later, the warlord returned to Muramasa's workshop, and sure enough, he had the head of the enemy soldier with him, as expected. The sword proved to be incredibly effective, and it quickly became the warlord's favorite weapon. But Muramasa was not content to simply forge mundane swords after this experience. One day, Muramasa decided to put his skills to the test and challenge the most skilled swordsman in the land to a duel. After his death, the sword passed into the hands of various samurai and warlords, each of whom wielded it with great power. But this time, the sword's power did not go unchecked. Some say that the sword is still out there, waiting for the day when it will be wielded by a hero. What do you think? Is the sword of Muramasa nothing?